Where were we yesterday? We were in Fayetteville, Arkansas. The Every Given Saturday Tour 1.0 took us to Fayetteville, Arkansas for Cincinnati versus Arkansas yesterday. And it's in contention for the best trip we've ever taken. I'll talk about that more on the back end. Let's talk about the game first. Arkansas ends up winning this thing 31-24. I think the venue determined the outcome of this game. Trey Biddy and I got on Walk and Talk, by the way. Those of you around Arkansas know exactly how significant that is. And those of you who don't, just search Trey Biddy Walk and Talk on YouTube. I was the first guest ever on Walk and Talk, and so Biddy and I are walking around an empty Reynolds Razorback Stadium last night, and I said, Biddy, I think the venue determined this game today. I was on the field yesterday. You know me. I'll take the sunburn. Get me out of the press box. Put me on the field. And there were so many times, those of you who watched the game know what I'm talking about, there were so many times. Forget the overthrows. That's lack of execution on the offense's part for Cincinnati. And we can talk about that in a second. But, man, there were several times down in plus territory, down in the red zone, where Arkansas's crowd made it impossible for Cincinnati to function. They also backed them out of field goal territory another time. It was a factor all day. I mean, I was over there close to the Cincinnati bench a couple of times. Chaos. And you know good and well they've worked on it. You know good and well they've piped in crowd noise. That's kind of like Utah trying to get themselves ready for humidity. You can do all you want to. You can only somewhat prepare for it. And especially if you've got a new quarterback starting, there's only so much you can do to prepare that guy because there's only so much simulation that you can do relative to what a real-life football game's like. Well, Cincinnati played in a real-life football game yesterday, and they had trouble. So much so that Arkansas ended up winning this thing by 7. I'll just say it like this. I think there were more than 7 points worth of impact put on this game by that Arkansas crowd. And it was hot yesterday, and this was in the middle of the afternoon. And so I credit you guys because that was a memorable experience for me, a forgettable experience for Cincinnati because of you. The feedback, though, is what I want to talk about. From our own Arkansas brethren, some of them. The feedback I got was a very mixed bag about your own team. So I knew that there was going to be some unhappiness because, like I said with Ohio State, I knew there was going to be a little unhappiness amongst Arkansas Nation because everything didn't look fluid. And again, forget the amnesia that sets in over the summer. This, not your preview magazine, this is what real football looks like when you're playing with college kids and you don't have preseason games. That's what it looks like. You've got special teams iffy at best. You got turnovers. You've got injuries. You got cramping, and you got just a lack of execution. You got firing and missing, and that happens with a lot of teams in Week 1. Arkansas was no different. There was a time not too long ago where they would have dropped this game by 3 scores. Instead, they won yesterday, and that just signifies the elevation of the program overall. But what do we say? What did Meemaw say? Let's repeat it again. Wise men make observations in Week 1. Foolish men draw conclusions in Week 1. I had a lot of folks on the Josh, you know who you are, who were telling me Arkansas looks like the 4th best team in the West. At best, 4th best team. How do you know, friend? First off, you probably haven't even watched all the Western Division teams play yet. Secondly, how do you know the Arkansas you saw yesterday is going to be the one you see when they play Texas A&M in late September or when they play at Auburn in late October? You don't. You don't know what any teams are going to look like because I can't remember the last team that looked the exact same in late October and early November as they did in Week 1. Now, you could get worse. You could also get better. I don't know that many of them stay the same. So let's make observations. Observation was a clunky game yesterday, and Arkansas ends up getting the win anyway. That's just how college football works. Arkansas threw it 18 times yesterday. And I think early on, I talked to Kendall Briles after the game. Wasn't about his offensive game plan. I suspect that Kendall Briles probably wanted to throw that ball a little earlier on, and they completed a pass to Landers to start the first drive and then ended up with an incompletion. And Cincinnati got the ball, and they went on a drive that feels like forever, even though they didn't score. It started to tilt that game a little bit, and you start thinking to yourself, here's what we can't have. In this heat, in Week 1, I can't have that road team over there with a plus 20 plays run advantage on us in our own building at halftime because we're planning on turning these factors and turning our size advantage against them in the second half. Well, we can't do that if we've never been on the field and we hadn't been able to lean on them enough, so they started to run the ball a little more. They ran the ball okay by Arkansas standards. I don't think they ran the ball as well as they will end up running it when a lot of those pieces fall into place. I watched their offense yesterday. I think there's a different gear to the Arkansas offense, is what I'm telling you. And I think that over time, you'll see that kind of coalesce into something that's a little more balanced in terms of play calling. I don't think they'll tilt as heavy into the run, ironic though it may be because they got a good ground game, as they did yesterday. Because I think they know when they watch their defense, a little leaky on the back end, could have been much leakier on the scoreboard on the back end. When they watch their team overall, I think they know they're going to have to score a little bit more, maybe, than they did yesterday down the road. So I still believe there's a second gear for them. But I will say this. There was a time in this game, KJ Jefferson comes through for them exactly like Richardson did in the end for Florida. 31-24, Arkansas with the lead. Fourth quarter, Cincy is just pulled to within 7. There is 4:30 left on the clock. It's 3rd and 9. And they know, exactly like Billy Napier and that Florida staff, they know they got a guy at quarterback who they can look at and say, make it happen. And he did. KJ Jefferson made it happen on 3rd and 9. He gets the first down. They extend the drive. Cincinnati never touches the ball again. They bled the final 5 minutes off the clock in a one-possession game yesterday. Now, I didn't see Sam Pittman smile a whole lot after the game, kind of that euphoric smile. Maybe a grin every now and then. But one euphoric smile that came over his face was when he talked about that final drive, especially as an O-line coach. That stuff is sort of erotic in a way. I think that's the word that I've heard him use before. It's kind of erotic to bleed that final 5 minutes off the clock, and they can't do anything about it. Transfers are another key facet that decided this game for Arkansas. I mean, Jordan Dominic had a strip sack late in that game. Dwight McLaughlin had a big pick for him. He came in there from LSU. Drew Sanders from Alabama had a sack for him. Landon Jackson had a sack. All those guys are integral parts of this team, and all those guys are playing positions that in a bygone era, Arkansas would have had to start from scratch at. They would have had to go in recruiting and probably get a guy that did not have a committable offer from Bama, and they would have had to take a couple of years and develop him, and then as a junior, he'd finally be on the field. It's not the way it is there anymore. And that's why you should not automatically just expect this dip only because they had a good season the year before. That's not the way it's going to work anymore. Now, here's the flip side of that coin. Success is not a continuum. Success is not something that just because you had 9 wins last year, okay, that's our starting point this year. You start at 0 again. To make that very clear, that's how expectations get out of whack. You win 9 games, you start at 0 the next year. You don't get to carry it over. Now, what you can do is you can carry a lot of the principles and a lot of the characteristics and identity over and hope that that is duplicated, and then maybe your outcome's a little better because you built inch by inch in those departments, but you don't carry anything over. And hey, that message is for a lot of folks out there, a lot of teams out there, not just Arkansas. But I look at them, the way they're being able to recruit, the way they're being able to leverage the portal. They got the toughest schedule in the country, or one of the toughest schedules in the country. They don't hide from that. I don't think they're going anywhere, though. But they'll be competitive in every game they play. I think they will, much like Ohio State, use this game as an entry point to 2022. And then I think by the time Arkansas is in mid-October, I think they'll look back and Arkansas will say, you know, if we could get Cincinnati again this week, I think we'd win that game pretty comfortably.